like icon.
All right, so Chapter 7, Simple Graphics and Image Processing. That sounds pretty awesome. However, we're going to keep talking about classes so that we can talk about building our own graphic user interface, which is not what they're talking about, simple graphics and image processing. It's certainly a chapter well worth looking at. We'll probably blip back to it. They talk about turtle graphics. That's cool enough. We've already seen turtle graphics a little bit, so this part of the chapter would be pretty easy. And I'm sure that they know how to do some tricks with it that we don't. Drawing two-dimensional shapes, okay, well, you know, squares, triangles. We're awesome, we know how to do that. Creating something that'll walk about randomly on the screen. All that's doing is generating a random number to pick the angle and the length. And then as soon as it draws that line, it picks another random angle and length. That might be really fun to do. Might work that into a class or something. All right, now they're doing some cool stuff. Still done with turtles. That might be fun to look at. Image manipulation operations. If you have an image that you load up, you can rotate it, you can blur part of it, you can sharpen part of it. That's all sounding pretty cool. So that's kind of where the chapter would really get interesting, is about that. But we're going to talk about classes first so that we can talk about user interfaces, known as the TK-INTER library. That's what we're going to be using today. TK-INTER. QRSTU. We're putting the U into programming. Alrighty. Lecture U. Alrighty. So Deb, what do we need to do? Do we need another example of a class, or do you have a specific question, or?
I mean, I never really saw it actually like run.
Okay. Well, let's write another class and see if it starts to make sense. See if it gels. So I'm going to make a class where we put in somebody's first, middle, and last name. And then we can manipulate that information. So at some point in it, don't type this, I'm going to have a self.first variable in it. I mean, you could type it. There's nothing wrong with it. A self.middle name and a self.last name. That's what the class is going to contain. And it's going to have some kind of method that uses that. It's going to have an init method that sets those things. And then it's going to have a get full name method that will add those three things together so that we could print them out or something like that. So let's name the class. Class name. Colon. And we need an init method. Now when I do this, I'm going to type def space. Make sure you get the space, and underscore underscore. Make sure you get exactly 2, no more, no less, just to forestall some problems. init, and 2 more underscores before the parentheses. Just make sure you get that space there, else it's a syntax error. And the first parameter of a function that's part of a class, technically known as a method. A method is a function that is part of a class. A class is a blueprint for objects that contain data variables and methods that use the data. These are going to be the 3 data variables that our class uses. This is one of the methods. Every time we define a method, inside the parentheses, the first thing we have is got to be the word self. It's just a given. You don't see this in other programming languages like C++ or Java, but we do in Python. And then if we want to be able to pass in any other information, and here's my goal. I'll show you what my goal is. Down in main, I want to be able to do this. Something like n1 equals name, except with a capital N. Name, parentheses, Susan, end quote, B, end quote, Anthony. That's where I'm going with this. And then I want to be able to do something like this. I'm still getting kind of spacing errors here or something. I don't know what's going on. But I want to be able to print in1.get underscore full underscore name, parentheses, in parentheses, like that. That's how I want it to work. I want to be able to create a name, inserting these three values into it, and then to be able to have a method called getFullName, which will return Susan plus B plus Anthony. To get that to work, you see these three arguments here? We need, why is my mouse not scrolling anymore? We need three parameter variables defined up here. So why not just call it fn for first name, mn for middle name, and this is definitely an L and not a 1, ln, parentheses, colon. And we need to set these three variables we see here. So if you type them in with me, tab them over twice, because they got to be under the def function, and they need to be tabbed over one more. And what's it going to say? Self.first equals fn, so that parameter variable gets copied into it. Self.middle equals mn, and self.last equals ln. Now we need this function, this method called getFullName. Every time you define a method, just like a function, you have to have the def keyword, and it needs to be in line with all the other def keywords, right? So I'm going to put def space get underscore full underscore name. And what's the first thing I have after the open parentheses? Every time we write a method that's part of a class, self. Yep. But it doesn't need anything else, right? Because we're not passing it any data in here. So I'm not going to tack on anything else with commas. I'm just going to close that right there. And it's going to return fn plus a quote space quote plus ln, middle name, mn plus quote space quote plus ln, not one n. There we go, right? It's just adding the first name, the middle name, and the last name, and the technical name for adding when you're using strings is concatenating, right? And it's putting spaces between everything. Without them, it'd say Susan B. Anthony with no spaces in it.
So getFullName does not require you to. Should you be record? Are you recording this? Or?
I've made a bad mistake here, though. This is probably what your question is. That should be self.fn.
Right.
And self.mn. Thank you for catching that before I ran it. Self.fn. Why? Because that's this variable. Plus self.mn. Plus self.ln. And why don't we make this a string and then return that string? So rather than have the word return there, delete that word and just make it say s equals. And certainly remove that semicolon. I'm sorry, I just taught C#, and so I have semicolons on the brain. Make this say return S. Now if we've played our cards right, then it'll print out Susan space B space Anthony. Now we might make it a little bit fancier. Like, what if they don't pass in a middle name? What it's going to print out is going to be Susan Anthony with 2 spaces. We might not want the 2 spaces. We might figure out a way of removing it. But that's not really the point of this. The point of this is... Ooh, and it blew away. Blew up. The name object has no attribute fn. Oh, what do you know? Deb, maybe you were warning me about this as well. I think the fastest fix would be just to change this to FN and MN for middle name and LN. So guys who are still typing along, you see I just changed those. Instead of saying first name, middle name, last name, or whatever I had it called, I just shortened the variable names to match these. Why did I do that? Because otherwise I was going to have to lengthen these, and I've kind of decided that I'd rather type short things rather than long.
Right, because what I was trying to say, well, two things. First, the get full name. You don't have to pass data into that. It's just gonna it's called, it's just gonna execute what you have within it, right?
Right.
Like
this
the
object
INIT requires those variables to be passed, that data to be passed into it first.
Right, because what is the init function doing? It's populating all the data. It's filling in all the data that makes this object what it is. But then all the functions can just use that data, so they don't need things passed in. Now maybe they do, maybe there's something that has to be passed in. But if not, it's just going to use all these variables.
Right. And then before you change this, see, that's one of the things that I was like, is there something, if you declare a variable self.first name and then you set it to equal FN, is that something?
That was a total botch on my part. Right, I
thought that's something that class does.
Right, no. Where I had first name here, that was a total botch because it has no idea what self-FN does. It was thinking that, that has to be FN to match that.
Okay.
They would have to match. I could have either changed these to make them the longer ones, or I can change that to the short version. Good question. So these methods are functions that use the data. Just like I said, it's a blueprint for objects that contain data and the methods that use the data. Here's one of our methods that uses the data. And I hope I got it right this time. Okay, cool. Susan B. Anthony. Now just playing around, if I did not pass in a middle name, I didn't know Susan's middle name, and so I just passed in empty quote, it's going to print Susan Anthony with a space. I'm wondering if I can fix that. That's not really the point of the lesson, but what if we did this? This is just a stab at it, and if I get lost, I'll undo it. S.replace all double spaces with single spaces. See what I'm doing there? There's two spaces between those quotes, and there's only one space there. So replace is a method that's part of the string class. You can call it any time you have a string. All right, and then printed it out, Susan Anthony, without a space. I'm kind of fond of that. I'll show you. No reason to belabor it. If you skipped doing the last name, like, you only knew Cher's first name, or, it would have been adding multiple spaces together because she didn't have a middle name or a last name, and so if we printed something out, we'd have too many spaces. This takes care of that. So, I added this before I even wrote the rest of the class. This is kind of a guideline. But I'm going to write another one down here. This creates what is known as an object. The class is the blueprint. The object is what you make from the blueprint, right? You might have a blueprint for, building a toy car. And then the toy car you make from that is the object. Or you have a blueprint for a house. The house that you make is the object. So down here, I'm going to make another name. And the way you make an object is, don't type what I'm about to type. Blah, blah, blah. This is the name of the class right there. And then after the parentheses, or inside the parentheses, are any variables that need to fill in these three guys. If he wasn't defined with any, then we wouldn't be passing in anything. Okay. But what is the name of our class? It's certainly not DLK blah, blah, blah. Our class is called name. And so here we have, oh, come on, type. Right. Lady, end quote. I have no idea what her middle name is, quote, Gaga, end quote. I'm going to put Susan's middle initial back in there. There we go. And I'm going to print her information out too. I'm going to be totally lazy, copy and paste this line. Or maybe I shouldn't. Tell you what. Let's do it this way. Full name equals into dot get underscore full underscore name, parentheses in parentheses, and then print that out. Print into in parentheses. And I'm going to run it just to make sure that I got it working right, rather than just sit here and feel proud. Oh yeah, oh boy, that stunk. Wonder what I did wrong. Oh, what did I do wrong? I didn't want to print into. What did I want to print? Into is the object itself, and so when we print it out, it's just going to print out some memory address.
Get full name?
Right, but I did that on the line above, so why don't I just print out full name?
Full name? Yeah.
Let's do that. So I'm going to change that to say full name. Or firstly, I'm going to undo it, run it again, and eyeball it a little bit more. What it's doing is it's dumping out some kind of debug information. I printed out the object itself, and it's telling me, yo, it's a name object, and here's its memory address. Now that really is almost completely useless information. So we're going to make it correct by replacing this into with full name.
What did you copy?
What I copied there, I just copied the word full name and pasted it there because I'm lazy.
You're efficient.
That too. Alrighty. Graphical user interfaces using the TK-INTER library. I think I uploaded a folder with some examples. Going to be fun trying to use the examples and have the code on the screen at the same time. Where did those examples go? Alright, I need to drag this thing up to the top so we can discuss it as well. Alright, if you refresh your modules, if you click on the module's name again, you're going to see two new modules. One of them is called Projects, and one of them is called TK-INTER. Stands for TK Interface. I'm not really sure what the TK stands for. You can Google it up. But TK-INTER is the graphics library that builds the graphical user interface, the windows and checkboxes and stuff like that. And projects, well, this is just the expanded form of the projects that were listed in the itty bitty project ideas file, right? And so if you want to read more details about it, right, only some of them are more detailed than they were in the short description problem, you know. Like I fleshed out the baseball one a little bit. Not that I'm a big expert in baseball, but unfortunately they all say Java, sorry, so I need to go in and edit them to say Python. I will do that, but the project, you know, is the same regardless of what language it's written in. I think they're all going to have that same title. I'm gonna fix that, but there they are. So you can look at the short project ideas to pick them, and if you want more details about a specific one, look it up. The one that's by far the longest, oh, I don't even want you to do this works versus else. I guess I could leave it there though. You can look at it. By far the longest is the one that's called PyFighter, and it's just because people kept asking for more and more examples and details. It probably doesn't need as many details. You could probably do it just based on what's on the first or the second page. But if you want more details about it, that's fine, or if you want to write your own game, where I mentioned that somebody wrote a Pokemon game where you pick a Pokemon and the computer picks a Pokemon and you pick which attack and the computer picks which attack, and eventually, somebody's reduced down to 0 hits. Kind of neat. So anyways, there is an assignment called, what project are you doing? So by Sunday night, I want you to pick the project. Not finished it, right? But at least picked it. And then each week another folder is going to be created, so that next Sunday you tell me how far you've gotten, and next Sunday you tell me how far you've gotten. I'm not expecting it to work over Thanksgiving week, but I still want you to upload something at the end of it, whether you have or not. It's just going to keep, prodding you to keep making progress on it. So that's what those folders are going to be for. And you get a grade for doing so don't blow it off just because you didn't do anything over Thanksgiving week and nothing has changed. Still upload a note, even if it's the same note as last time. Make sense, gang? All right. Let's look at user interfaces. Let's look at the TKINTER module. Okay. Grid example, password example, label, buttons that change labels. This is the easiest, actually. And so I'm going to make an example based on this one. So I'm going to steal a picture of it and then type from that. Now, since we already have this example, I'm not going to follow it exactly, right? Because you could just type it in yourself. Wouldn't need me here. All right. I don't know if you want to create a new one or just tack it on down here, right? I think I'm just going to tack it down in here. To do a GUI interface, we will import TKINTER. But we're going to do it in the syntax from TKINTER import asterisk. Meaning load all the functions in, all the methods in, but do not require them all to be prefixed with TKINTER. Otherwise, we would have to be doing things like endone. TKINTER.label equals blah, blah, blah. Instead, we can just say label equals blah, blah, blah. So that's the reason we're doing this syntax. From TKINTER import space asterisk. Now we need to make a window. I'm going to make these variables awfully short. WN stands for window. WN equals capital T, lowercase k, and that has to be exactly correct. Let's run it from that part and see what it does. Ooh, it created a window. That's what that command does, is it creates a window, but it's got no data in it, of course. When you start sticking data in your window, you have to create what are known as frames. You're not going to be able to see the frames, but everything that goes into the window has to be part of a frame. I guess just like you're hanging pictures on a wall. You have to put it in a frame before you can hang it on the wall. So we're going to create a frame. I'm going to call it F1 because, lo and behold, we're going to probably come back and create a second frame. F1 equals capital F, frame. And what frame? What window is this attached to? WN. All right, I'm going to leave a couple spaces here because I know I'm going to be coming back to fill something in. I want to display something on the screen, so I'm going to need to use a string. However, TKINTER cannot display a string. It has its own specialized string class called string var with a capital S and a capital V. So to get this information to display on the screen, I'm going to have to create a string var. String, whoopsie, whoopsie, whoopsie. What am I doing? S1 equals string, capital S, var, or var, V-A-R, open parentheses, close parentheses. And now we're going to set it to a value. S1.set, parentheses, in parentheses, or parentheses, quote, hi, end quote, in parentheses. Now this creates a string, but it doesn't put it anywhere in here, right? Because S1 is not connected to F1, and it's not connected to WN. We haven't tied these variables to these objects yet. The window is an object, and so is the frame. So our next command is going to be to create a label, and it's going to be hooked up to the frame. So LAB, I don't know why I say label A and label B when everywhere else I was doing 1 and 2. So LAB1 equals label with a capital L, parentheses, F1, comma, text equals, quote, 0, end quote, parentheses, width, or not in parentheses, comma, width equals 20. Not minus 20, equals. So far, everything's been an equal sign, even if I type minus. Now the very last thing we need to do is do what's known as a pack. After you stick the frame on the screen, we're still not going to see any of this stuff until we pack it. So we need to execute a pack command. What is our frame called? It's called F1. That was a 1, and if you typed L, then you better type in L down here. F1.pack, parentheses in parentheses. Well, can't see much there. I'm not real impressed with the results. Let's keep going. Let's create another string variable, and another label, and another frame. So back up to F1 equals frame, WN. Let's make a second frame. F2 equals frame, capital F, parentheses, WN, in parentheses. Let's come down here and make a second label. LAB2 equals label, parentheses, F1. We're attaching this label to the frame, comma, but we're not going to just fill in some text. Instead, we're going to set it equal to the string variable. So what we're going to do is say text variable, got to get the spelling correctly, equals string, S1, comma, and let's also assign it a width. Width equals 20 in parentheses. Now I know there's a lot of typing, so I'm expecting there to be some syntax errors, but by the time when I run it or when I come and help y'all. So now we have a second frame created. We better pack that too. So F2.pack, parentheses in parentheses. And we're not seeing it. Why aren't we seeing it? I'm going to start whining. Because I didn't pack the labels. You got to pack everything you create, apparently. I forgot that. So underneath frame1 pack and frame2.pack, another technique would be to pack it as soon as you create it, right? I could have done, don't do this because I've already packed them down there, but I could have done F1.pack there, and I could have done F2.pack there, and I could have done lab1 pack. Actually, that'd be probably, wouldn't that be more comprehensible? I'm not sure which is more comprehensible. Let's do that. I'm going to come back. I deleted those pack statements from the bottom. Sorry, I went too fast. I deleted them from the bottom. I'm going to come up here and underneath F1 equals frame, I'm going to make that F1.pack, parentheses in parentheses. I'm going to do the same thing underneath F2. F2.pack, parentheses in parentheses. Same business under the labels. lab1.pack, parentheses in parentheses, and the same thing under lab2. Please tell me I have the recorder going. Yeah, okay. lab2.pack. Just as a curiosity, does it crash if I say wn.pack? It's not necessary. I wonder what it does. Yeah, didn't think so. Alrighty. However, I saw the rest of it working. When I run it now, here's what I see. It sure squished an itchy bitchy, but there it is. Right? Frame 1 has got a number in it. What number does it got? It's got this one right here. How can I drag you down? You gonna let me expand you so I can drag you around? There we go. Right? Frame 1, we filled up with a label that said text equals 0. We could have put anything we wanted to, but it's that. And then frame 2, oh, I meant to put F2 here, right? I meant to put it in a separate frame. I'm not sure it's going to look any different, but it's what I intended, so I'm going to change that to F2. So that's the line that I just had to change due to my inattentiveness, or copying and pasting or something like that. Now, it really didn't look any different. It created a frame. It looks like that, and it looks like that. The one frame had 2 pieces of data. Everything is being arranged vertically. What do I mean by that? What if I wanted the 0 on one side and the high on the other?
What if you wanted them to enter data into there?
We'll get there. These are just what are known as labels. Very good comment. Very, very good comment. Labels are for displaying data. And then there's another entry type, another object type for letting you enter data. For entering data, use, and I'm going to leave that blank because I have to remember. The first thing we're going to demonstrate, though, is a button. Oh, wait. The first thing I wanted to demonstrate is how to put a field on the left or the right. So, now I guess that's not as important, but I want to. I want to make our label go on the left of the frame or the right of the frame. So, frame left Python, TKINTER. Place a button on the left of the frame.
Is it side equals?
Yeah, you spotting it? My eye hasn't seen it.
It's in your notes.
Well, that's his questions, and down here.
It's in your notes at the bottom.
Oh, well, that'd be a valid way of knowing that that's how to do it, huh?
I think it says laba.pack.
Side equals right and side equals left. Okay, yeah, I goofed that up. So, where it says lab1pack, we're going to send the label to the right. So lab A, or lab1, side equals, and then this next word has to be all caps, right. And then we're going to pack the label, and we're going to make it say side equals left. Now I'm surprised I don't have to send the frames to the right or the left, but let's see how it works. No difference. Now the deal is that the example is putting more than one thing on the screen. It's also sticking buttons on it. And the labels are going on the right and the buttons are going on the left. So, looks like that's correct. That looks like where this is going. Let's add a button to it. You know, if we added them to the same frame and then sent one to the right and one to the left, I bet it would work. So if we change this back to a 1, right there, sorry it keeps flip-flopping. I don't mind you seeing this though, because we kind of get some concepts, right? High wound up on the left and 0 wound up being on the right. And the reason that worked is because we put them both in the same frame. But I'm going to change it to F2. And the reason I'm going to do that is we're also going to add some buttons to it. And you click a button and it fills in or changes the color or something like that. Now buttons are a little bit weird because you have to write the function that the button calls. It's called event-driven programming. So far everything we've done is called procedural programming, right? It stops at the top and it just runs all the way to the bottom. Event-driven means that it's sitting there waiting for the user to do something, and then when they click it, it calls a function in your code. But until then, that function doesn't do anything. Okay, so fixing everything back the way I want it, I'm going to make F1 and F2, and I better pause. And I want both of these things to be on the right. So both of them need to say side equals right. It's not going to change the way it looks right now because of the frames. We only have 2 frames, and since there's not 2 objects, it still leaves it centered. But when we add a second object to the frame, like a button, I'm going to want buttons on the left side. And then these values are going to be on the right side. Alrighty, let's create some buttons. We're going to put 2 buttons. One's going to go into frame 1. So it'll be right next to the 0. And the other one's going to be on frame 2, so it'll be next to the word high. If I was trying to arrange these things in some kind of logical order, maybe I would cut this and paste it to right here, because this is where we declare it, and here's where we use it, so why not move it a little bit down? As a matter of fact, I don't know. Why not? I'm going to highlight all of that stuff. Cut those 4 lines underneath f1.pack and paste it above lab 2. The reason why is I'm going to create everything that gets attached to frame 1 all in a row, right? And then the next frame, we're going to add a button to it as well. So let's make our button. B1 equals, now button has to be capital B. What frame is this button going to go in? It's going to go into frame 1. What do we want it to say? I don't know. For right now, we're just going to make it say B1. We'll get more clever later. End quote, comma. And what does it do when it's clicked? We're going to say command equals, and we're going to name a function. Well, we haven't written the function yet, but we're gonna click 1 end parentheses. Now let's pack this and say side equals left. So the top row will have a button, B1, on the left side, and that label with the 0 in it is going to be on the right. So B1 dot pack parentheses side equals left into parentheses. Now I bet it's going to crash because we haven't written a function called click1. Nope, click1 not defined. True enough. So we better define it. How about we do it above where we make our window? DEF click1 parentheses in parentheses colon. For now we're just going to print a message. Print B1 clicked end quote in parentheses. Ooh, and it'll just blow all up. I wonder what I did wrong. Okay. I'm gonna run it again and look at the line number that it crashed on. B1 equals button F1 comma. It doesn't like line 106. I don't have a line 106. What you talking about? $45. Well, no wonder. It's where I created the button. Let me look at my syntax a little bit more carefully. I forgot something. How did we create the label? Our first parameter is the frame. What's our second parameter? What's the difference between the way I did it that way and that way?
You don't have text.
I don't have text equals, right? It's a named parameter. Text equals. That'll work. I hope. All right, so there it is. There's B1. Now this is looking kind of goofy, but at least we have a button over here, right? We could specify the width of the button to make it fill up more space. So after command equals click 1 or before it or something, maybe after it, comma width equals 20. There. That's looking better. Now you may not like the fact that the window got shrunk to the absolute bare minimum, right, to hold our stuff. Well, that's just a consequence of the way we've created things, and when we called .pack, it shoved it all in there in as little space as possible. When you create these frames and stuff like that, you can create padding around them to position them a little bit more. Now you might be hoping that you could specify them by their pixel, right? I want my button to start at pixel 30, 40 if you're familiar with that idea. It doesn't really work like that. Python gives you a library, but once it gives you the library, it's designed so that you could resize it and everything, and if you had specified positions in absolute pixels, it wouldn't really work. All right, so what are we going to really make B1 do? How about if B1 adds 1 to that value? Oh, well, I didn't prove that it was doing anything, right? Each time I click B1, it should be printing B1 clicked, right? This is called a callback function. This is a call, wherever you went. This is a callback function, meaning that the user interface is just hanging out. And if you went back and you looked at our notes, you'd see something that I left off. A call to wn.main loop. Just like with the turtles, you don't have to put that there, but technically it's correct. Maybe we'll scroll down to the bottom and add that as well. At the very bottom of your code, put wn.main loop, parentheses in parentheses. Let's add a comment down here while we're at it. Buttons need callback functions that get called when the user clicks the button. They could all call the same function, but that'd be silly, right? Or each one can call a different function.
Professor, can we take a look at the earlier code?
Yeah.
So I can see.
Yeah, I'll scroll back up. How far up?
Right, stop right there.
There we go. So this is the callback function where it's defined. This is how we create a button and we specify what function it's going to call when they click on it. We could add a second button that calls a separate function.
Okay, that's wrong. One thing I got wrong.
And you always have to have your callback function before your button?
Yes.
You make your button?
Yes, unless you do that thing where you use that if name equals main and you put absolutely everything inside of functions, then it doesn't matter what order they're in. But otherwise, you're going to want to define it before.
Can you scroll back down?
Right there?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Get the rest of the stuff.
Just to frustrate the people who are typing in these 4 things, why don't we go and create another button? So underneath b1.pack, we're going to do b2 equals button, and this needs to be attached to frame 2. So b2 equals button with a capital B, parentheses f2, comma. For now, we're just going to make it say text equals b2, end quote, comma, command equals click2. Guess what? That means we're going to have to write a function called click2, and width equals 20. We've got to pack that one as well. That was an in parentheses, and I accidentally put a slash there. That was not correct.
Is button 2.
And then let's call b2.pack and send that button to the right as well. b2.pack, parentheses, side equals right. And I'm not expecting this to all gel after just 1 lecture, right? 2 lectures, yeah, you better have it all. No, I'm kidding. But 1 lecture, this lecture is to get you used to the idea of creating what are known as the controls, the buttons and the labels, and sticking them in frames, and then packing them so that they go into the window. That's what we're doing. There is another way of sticking things into a window called the grid. Rather than using pack, you stick things into a grid, and the grid's kind of cool. I don't know it as well, but I remember liking it a lot more than the frames in the pack. So, you know, that'd probably be a good thing to demonstrate next time. All right, what's wrong here? I don't have a click method for this guy to call. So I'm going to have to scroll back up. I'm just going to copy that click1 method and change the name of it to click2, you know, and any other incidental changes. So come up here, copy click1, paste it, and change all the 1s to 2s. Kaboomy.
I just tried to run it, and where it says F2 equals frame WN, it comes after our insert, so we got to take it.
Oh, yeah, we got to cut this down. We got to move this down to below where we create the frame. So I just had you type in B2 equals button. Good spotting, Dev. Grab those 2 lines, cut them, and paste them under the label here, right before the comments. You see the 2 lines that I'm cutting? B2 equals button. Cut those and paste them right before the comments. Sorry about that. I hate to get that wrong, because the more I move up and down inside the code, the more likely it's going to be that people can't quite follow. All right, and there's our 2 buttons, right? B1 and B2.
Okay, so why do we have to move that?
Because
Why did we have? Yeah, go ahead.
It's see in the code what we just put down for B2. See how that after the first parenthesis we got F2 there. It's calling on F2.
This is what.
Well, when we had it placed up there, we didn't define F2 yet.
Right. See, we're accessing F2, but it's not even created yet. It's like trying to use X before X has been input.
It's looking for previous code. Is looking for F2 and it's
Yeah.
not finding it.
Gotcha.
So that's
Yeah.
why we place it after.
So I need to cut that and move it back down to where it belongs. Now, since this is being shoved onto the right and on the left, we could change the order of them. Right, we don't have to do that in this order. We could create the rights. Whoops.
So basically everything that has to do with button 2 or label 2 has to be clumped up in the same area.
Right, because they're being attached to frame 2. It looks like I've made a boo-boo here. Right and left right and right. I'm not liking that, so I'm going to make that say left. It just happened to work, it seemed like, or maybe I didn't run it enough to notice. And I don't have the recorder going, so wait a minute.
That side looked right.
That's pretty cool.
Like we did before. Where they were both on the same sides and then pushed all the answers to the right.
Label equals right. Oh, I've got the button. I told you to move the button down above the comments, and then I put them way too far up. Okay, so the labels go on the right, and the buttons we're making go on the left. Now, you probably already have it correct in your code. I got myself confused. There we go. B1 and B2. And when they click, they do something. Well, they ought to do something more interesting than just print a message. Like maybe when we click B2, maybe the word hi is going to change to goodbye. And maybe when we click B1, maybe it's going to read the value of 0 and change it to a 1. Now, if that's the case, we should not be using a text like that. We should be using a numeric variable.
So do we have to make an S2 to say goodbye?
Just a second. My brain is... We should do the first one there first. All right. Let's just make it so that when we call B2, we set the value of that S2 variable. Except I called it S1. All right, anyways. So, button 1, when it's called, is going to change string 1. No, but string 1 is associated with label 2. I'm getting really dissatisfied with the fact that these 1s and these 2s don't match. Let's fix that. Instead of S1, change that to S2, S2, and S2. You see where we made these 3 changes? And now click to is going to change the value of S2. And I'll pause and do a walkabout in just a second. So click to right here. This is the stuff that I just changed as I changed the S1 to S2 in all 3 of those lines. When B2 is clicked, it's just going to do S2.set to quote goodbye, end quote in parentheses, right? It's changing that string var, which automatically updates the label that is attached to that string. So I clicked on B2 and it changed it to goodbye. My next goal, as soon as I pause that, walk around, make sure everybody's doing okay, is to make it so that button 1 changes that 0 to a 1 to a 2. But what I'm going to have to do to get that to work is where this says text variable equals S2, we're going to need to create a variable that we can attach to label 1, a numeric label, a numeric variable. And if I get stuck on that, we won't spend too much time on it. But I'd like to get it to work. Let's pause. Okay, so what are we going to do now? Just like we have a string attached to the second label, let's make an integer that's attached to the first label. So I'm going to come up here above where we create the first label and make an int var. I1 equals, just like this is string var with a capital S, capital V, int var, parentheses in parentheses, and we're going to set it equal to 0 or 1 or some number, right? I1 dot set parentheses 0 in parentheses. One more change. This is going to have to say text variable, just like it did here, where this says text variable equals S2 because that's the variable that this thing is linked to. This one's going to say text variable equals I1. All right. So far, so good. At least it didn't crash. So what are the changes we made? We just added those 2 lines. No. We added these 2 lines, and then we changed that from saying text equals 0 to text variable equals I1, which is still 0, right? But it's in a different form. Now come up to click 2. No, wait. Click 1. And I think we're going to need to get the value of the integer, add 1 to it, and then set it. So val equals I1.get, right? We got to get the value out of that integer. Val plus, okay, and then, yeah, val plus equals 1. We're adding 1 to it. And now we're going to set it again. I1.set to our new value. So you seeing what we're doing? That field currently is 0. So we call .get, which stores that 0 into val. We add 1 to it, so val now equals 1, and then we set it so that that field on screen now will say 1. I hope it works. There we go. Alrighty, I think it's about time to comment out these clicked messages. Now, maybe the fact that B2 changes it to goodbye immediately is kind of boring. I'm wondering if there's some way we could disable this button so that after it's been clicked one time, you can't click it anymore. That's kind of useless, enhancement, so I'm not going to actually pursue that. Something else you can do is you can change the colors of the controls as you create them.
Can you scroll down real quick?
Yep. How far down?
Please, right there.
There. These are the 3 lines that we just changed, as well as the click 1 method. Okay, so when we created that label, or that button, we can set a background color and a foreground color. So maybe after width, let's set the background color of that to yellow. So width equals 20, comma, BG stands for background color. So width equals 20, comma, BG equals to quote, yellow, end quote. My hunch is that we could also set the text color by doing FG equals foreground. But let's make sure this works first. All right, now it's yellow. Let's try setting this color, high. Go down to the one that says high right there. There's the label that is set to high, right? And set its background color to something else. BG equals, and we got a whole bunch of colors we can choose from. TKINTER colors. A whole bunch of them. Chocolate, steel blue, light sky blue. Bless you. How about just Cadet Blue 1. That sounds cool. So I'm going to come back in here, and this is going to be Cadet with a capital C, Blue with a capital B, and then a 1. And I could change the background, or it could just blow up because I spelled it wrong. It's not cated, it's cadet. It's funny that it knew it was wrong before it ran. Or I guess it did run. All right. Cool. And how about my hunch about foreground color? This number, background equals yellow, comma, FG equals, quote, green. That'll look pretty. Not. Alrighty. Let's run it. Yeah. I mean, yellow and green is not real visible, is it? But how about if I made the background color black and the foreground color yellow? I wonder if I can set the color of an entire frame when I create it. I'm not going to bother. But you could also set the background color and the foreground color of the buttons just like that. Now, if we had time, we'd do a text entry. We don't have time for a text entry, but we have time to do a message box. What's a message box? A message box is just something that pops up on the screen. You know, like this message. Like if I type that and I click the close box, that's a message box. So let's go grab my example of it, and then we better end. Actually, we better end right dang now, so that we can create the drop box and everything. All right.
Take roll.
Pardon me?
Roll.
Yep. All right. So we'll make the drop box and do all that good stuff.